I'm Jeffrey Raven. I'm an architect on the faculty of New York Institute of Technology in Manhattan. I'm actually over here in Europe on a National Science Foundation grant to work on climate and prototyping, so climate in cities, through the lens of urban design. And I'm working with a number of colleagues here in Europe and also with a trip to South Africa to prototype these kinds of emerging districts. My background is also in architecture practice, so I have a long experience in working with large-scale projects in the United States, but also internationally in Middle East, Southeast Asia, and South Asia, India, Vietnam, China, and I bring that experience to the table with my students. So it's something that I feel that enriches the work that we do in our design studios, because the kind of sort of skill sets and knowledge that I accumulated over the many years, I think I learned a lot about the kinds of challenges that are confronting cities in the 21st century. And I would sort of characterize them in three ways. One is the mass migration that cities are facing globally. You've got large populations that are moving out of rural areas towards cities, and the cities are just straining under the load from an infrastructural point of view and other kinds of factors. The second is, and it's a corollary to that, is the kind of issues around equity, where these large populations are also struggling to make ends meet, access to basic services, that kind of thing. And then, on top of that, you've got global climate change, which is making cities hotter and wetter. And we've got mass desert, increased deserts in former agricultural areas, which are also putting strain on the food, energy, and water systems. So those are the kinds of challenges that I'm bringing to the students in the work that we're doing through our design studios. Earlier, I had an interview that that is also available, talking about the kind of work that we do in the urban design climate workshops, the sort of win-win opportunities that we are looking for within this challenging context. So I think that some of the case studies might be informative in terms of this discussion. The cases that I've worked on, cities are obviously operating in a complex set of circumstances. There are political there's a political context in which decision makers are operating. There are issues around stakeholder groups that don't have their voice heard. And at the same time, we've got these large-scale systems challenges that cities are facing. One of the things that's been really, I've found complicated and sort of lesson learned in a certain way is as we approach cities from sort of a climate perspective, city stakeholders often find it difficult to understand or appreciate how the climate science affects their daily lives. Their daily lives are complicated and are challenging on a number of fronts. So I think it's incumbent upon us to engage with city stakeholders where they live, in the kind of, walk in their shoes and kind of address the issues that they're facing, and then make the sort of synergies with climate so that it enriches our work, because then our work is more relevant, but B, and actually much more importantly, that it actually improves the lives of intangible ways of citizens of a city. So from elected officials or public officials' perspective, they themselves also have challenges where they're looking at either decision-making cycles like a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, that sort of thing, or electoral cycles where they need to go up for election or be somehow evaluated. So for that reason, we need to look at phasing strategies. So we have short-term, quick fix types of strategies that have an impact from a climatic perspective, to middle-term and longer-term, more ambitious strategies. So an example of short-term might be everything from high albedo surfaces, such as reflective surfaces, so that the impact of the sun is less felt within the built environment, or access to bicycle or non-motorized transportation within the heart of the city. Middle term might be everything from a sort of legal code, building code perspective, to looking at sustainable urban drainage systems that could be helpful in capturing, retaining stormwater, but then has a knock-on effect with more parks, linear parks that are coming through the neighborhoods. And a longer term might be more ambitious types of three-dimensional form where you're looking at opening up the urban canyon to more sunlight, or to increased urban ventilation, that sort of thing. And then, of course, district energy strategies of holding, storing energy, those kinds of strategies. So really, we should be, as designers and planners, very cognizant of the complexity in which we're working. We should be very clear of what the expectations are for our mission, so that we don't sort of cross, we don't run across other kinds of expectations to what we can deliver, and at the same time be very clear in the kinds of scenario modeling that we do for our clients. So from a scenario modeling perspective, one thing that's very effective is to develop prototypical situations that city officials and city stakeholders can understand. So, for example, what we do is as far as with respect to our urban design climate workshops, we develop 3 scenarios, and we make it as sort of clear as possible. So scenario number 1 is a particular neighborhood currently facing challenges of climate and the kinds of other challenges that I've mentioned. Then we project to a 2050 or a future scenario, sometimes we choose 2050, where we would call it sort of business as usual, where the city is continuing to develop, maybe in an ad hoc way. And then bringing the kind of climate factors to the table, where we're really leveraging climate science through the lens of urban design and modeling the sort of outcomes, the performance outcomes of that particular type of scenario. That's very effective as a way, clear kind of visual perspective to city officials, so that they can sort of understand the choices that are ahead of them, for community stakeholders also to appreciate the potential impacts of what their neighborhood is going to go through, whether they like it or not. It's happening, but the kind of steps that could be taken to mitigate the extreme effects of climate in their context. For our students, then, we set out a hypothesis at the beginning of the studio where we look at a future neighborhood that is, in a particular city, and we've done a number of them in different cities around the world, and we assume a population growth within that city. So the city and the neighborhood is facing some real strains from a population growth perspective, from a density perspective. And then we're trying to then bring the kind of climate science work to the table, model the effects of these strategies within the context of an urban design project, so that these students are ready for a 21st century urban design practice where they will be confronting clients, cities, municipalities that are looking for innovative solutions to confront the challenges that they're facing. So we're very clear that the work that we do with our students is a kind of roadmap, if you will. We're developing a roadmap together for this 21st century urban design practice. And I feel like urban design is a very good platform to operate in the context of challenging times like this, because it's extremely, it's a multidisciplinary practice. It's a practice that requires an urban designer to be nimble, to be able to engage with stakeholder groups, elected officials, and other disciplines directly, and to also then diagram the potential impacts of their work on these different stakeholders within the project. So I think urban design is evolving. It's not static. It's a dynamic discipline, and it needs to continue to evolve to meet the kind of needs of 21st century cities.